the whole Samaria for good measure. But his servants, probably with big lumps in their throats, approach him gently and try very humbly, using strangely enough, oddly enough, yet again, the word Father. They look at Naaman and they say, Father, perhaps to humble themselves like children before him, to soothe his rage and anger and to appease his embarrassment. This expression of humility. They stand before him and they say, if the prophet had made it really, really difficult, if the prophet had asked you to do something next to impossible and very dangerous, would you then have done it? All he said was, go and wash and be clean. Perhaps it seems too simple, but then, what have you got to lose by doing it? If it doesn't work, you are no worse off than you were. And if it does work, you got a whole new life. So Naaman went to the Jordan River as he had been instructed. And he washed himself 7 times in the Jordan River. And when he came out from the water of the Jordan River, his skin was like the skin of a newborn infant. He went to Elijah, and he stood before Elijah and he said, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. The message of the story is that the God of Israel is the God of all people. God's saving acts are inclusive of all people. Naaman is a Gentile, not a Jew, yet God has chosen to restore him, to deliver him, to save his life, to heal Naaman the enemy before the world. Every country has its own societal customs and mores. Do you agree? There are certain things you do when you go to China. There are certain ways that you greet people when you go to China. How do you greet people? You bow. When you go to India, you greet people in a certain way. When you go to South America, you greet people in a certain way. When I go to Guatemala, I don't wear a bikini. It's just one of those things. Societal, well, I know, it's an image you just don't But societal mores are such that you must respect the culture of the people, the country that you're visiting. The second story for today is another story that takes place in Samaria. And this story is the story of Jesus. This is hundreds of years after the Naaman story. And in this story of Jesus, he is going through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria in order to get to Judea. So he came to the Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon, and he was very, very thirsty. Now, I have to tell you that there's a bit of cultural moray and custom that I need to tell you about. I need to give you some background so that you really are tuned in to what this scene is really about. All of you have probably heard this story many times about the woman at the well, but you miss the whole point of the story, really, because people get caught up in the woman. This isn't about the woman, it's about the water. The Samaritan and the Jews have a past, one which is actually spoken of in this story of the woman at the well. It is a 200-year-old story. It is a story of their past. 200 years before Jesus asked the no-name Samaritan woman at Jacob's well for a drink of water, there was a dispute between the Jews and the Samaritans as to where the correct location would be for worshiping God. Now, that is where they should have their cultic worship practices. The Samaritans had built a shrine on Mount Gerizim during the Persian period, and they claimed that this shrine was the proper place to worship God, not the temple in Jerusalem, which is where the Jews claimed that God had to be worshipped. But 72 years after the dispute began, Jewish troops decided to settle the controversy by destroying the shrine at the top of Mount Gerizim. As if that would settle the argument. For Samaritans, shrine or no shrine, like the Jews in Jerusalem today, temple or no temple, their sacred place of worship remained at Mount Gerizim. The Samaritans' place of worship, Mount Gerizim. Israelites' place of worship, the temple in the city of Jerusalem. So now you have the root of the tension between the Samaritans and the Jews. Some of you have known that they've hated each other for a long time. Now you've got a good clue why. Jesus, who is in Samaritan country sitting at Jacob's well, is awfully thirsty. And he has to be awfully thirsty to confront this Samaritan woman, because Jews don't talk to Samaritans.